Kentucky, man, expectations are just sky high in Lexington. This fan base, they think, if there is a year to knock off Georgia, we're getting them in Lexington late in the season. There's some turnover, of course, on offense. Chris Rodriguez status, I hear he's going to be suspended coming out the gate, but
Florida in week 2, that'd be interesting.
Right, if they don't have him, but not season threatening is my understanding of that situation. So I don't know. What thoughts on Kentucky? I mean, their fans hate when I say this, but the schedule lines up well, and I don't look at that as Kentucky's not worthy. I look at it like this is an opportunity here to do something you've never done and possibly punch that ticket to Atlanta. Like you said, things would have to go wrong for Georgia, and a lot would have to go right for Kentucky. But I got no problem with Kentucky fans thinking this could be their year. They finally punch that ticket.
Yeah, I think we have to start with what's been going on recently. I mean, they've won 10 games in 2 out of the last 4 years. I mean, if you go when I was, just starting watching college football, I mean, that would be almost unheard of for Kentucky. So, I mean, they sort of reached a kind of not necessarily a floor, but they've elevated the program under Mark Stoops to where we just expect them to win, 8 games a year, go to bowl games. And, the schedule does set up well for them to make a run and to be a top 25 team. And I think maybe that's another sign of kind of the respect for Kentucky. They're losing Wan'Dale Robinson. They're losing 3 great offensive linemen. And yes, they have replaced offensive linemen well. And they lost their offensive coordinator, Liam Cohen, not to mention defensive line, secondary. And yet we have them picked in the top 25. And we think they could finish second in the SEC East. So certainly getting Georgia at home is a huge opportunity to try and make a statement in the East. I still think that this team is a few paces behind Georgia. Georgia just has too much talent. And also, again, you're asking them to lose 2 times, Georgia to lose twice, and Kentucky to fill some of these question marks that we have.
Now, how big of a concern with Kentucky is receivers? I know they've attacked the transfer portal, but not every there's only one Wan'Dale Robinson. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
It's gonna be tough. I know they got the another Robinson,
Tavion Robinson from Virginia Tech. Yeah,
so he looked good. Dane Key, the true freshman. They got another guy out of Nashville, Brown, the true freshman. I mean, they've got guys that got promise. But again, how big of an issue is that? For again, we're not talking Kentucky trying to reach 6 games and go to a bowl, because those players I'm more than confident can deliver that. We're talking 10-win season possibly. Level of concern that those players will be a hindrance to that.
It's a good question. I think the entire operation maybe is to group in receivers. I think obviously Will Levis is one of the SEC's better quarterbacks. It's an incredibly deep year for quarterbacks in the SEC, and I think you'd like to see him cut down on some of the interceptions. And Kentucky's turnover situation was really weird last year, as you and I have talked about before. And then to go 5-1 one-score games with a negative turnover margin is almost unheard of. I am curious to see how the coordinator situation pans out. Liam Cohen was so good at they averaged about 11 more points a game with last year compared to 2020. Scangrinello comes over from the NFL. It's supposedly going to be the same system, maybe some tweaks in there. So I think there's a top-down concern of how does the new play caller, 3 new offensive line starters, and then the turnover at receiver, as you mentioned. I think Tavion Robinson will be an impact player. I do think Wan'Dale Robinson was a better player and pretty special all-around threat. So I think Robinson plus Dane Key and some of those other guys are probably going to be fine at receiver. My greater concerns are offensive line and play caller.
Now, what about the defense? I mean, I know they're losing a lot on the defensive front, but, man, they have just been stacking talent. And Kentucky's a program where they don't play a lot of freshmen. So they bring a guy in, they develop him for 2-3 years, and then they hit the field. And this is going to be the most talented defensive line I think they've ever had. Doesn't mean it's going to be the best, but there's promise there. And I love the linebackers. They got a group of experience, and they got a group of younger guys coming up. Again, maybe the most talented linebacking core in school history. But I do think there's a big question in the defensive backfield. They lost Corker.
Vito Tisdale tore his ACL in the spring too, so they're already down one guy.
There's issues there in the secondary, and the secondary was a little bit of a weakness last season. So what's your level of concern given that, it's great to have a great D-line and linebackers, but in today's game, when you're facing all these receivers, all these quarterbacks like you mentioned, secondary could cost you some games.
Yeah, I mean, they've tried to bolster the secondary through the transfer portal and bringing in some guys. I think they've improved their depth there as well. I think what's kind of interesting to your point, the defensive front, it's a new defensive front, but at the same time, there's a lot of talent coming in on that group. So I think the secondary is probably my biggest concern about this defense. I also think it goes to what we were kind of talking about with Kentucky, that they've sort of just reached a floor where you just expect them to have a good defense. I mean, they've been in the top 5 in scoring defense the last couple of years. Did a really nice job last year of not giving up big plays and sort of limiting the damage. You can bend but don't break, and be better in the red zone. The linebacker group is outstanding, man. It's one of the best in the SEC with Weaver and Jones and Square and some of those other guys. So love the linebackers. I think they're going to be fine up front. I think the secondary might be the biggest concern, and especially when you face Richardson, Hendon Hooker, Stetson Bennett, that's the group that'll probably determine just how far or where this team defense finishes in the SEC.
We've already hit on Kentucky, Georgia, but what do you think is going to be the tougher game, going down to Gainesville early in the season or later in the season at Tennessee?
It's a great question, man. I would say probably Tennessee. I think the first game. I mean, I guess the good for Kentucky is you're catching Florida in the season. Florida does have that element of surprise, but they also play Utah in that first game. So you can't play the FCS thing of kind of hiding and, you don't have to show a lot. You have to show something to beat Utah. So I think Kentucky will have a much better idea of what to expect from Florida. And because of all the new pieces at Florida and figuring things out, I think Tennessee is the second best team in the East. I don't think the gap between Tennessee and Kentucky is very wide, but going to Knoxville, giving Tennessee time to reload by the end of the year, I would say the Kentucky at Tennessee would be a little tougher.
Good answer, Stephen. I like that. You can stay.
Cousin Shane probably approves that one, doesn't he?
Next team.